My name is Tomas Varin, and on the morning of the Royal Standard inspection, I was the junior attaché walking 3 paces behind Trade Minister Dahlan Krast as he raised a porcelain cup to his lips and said in our own tongue, "Look at them. Beautiful decoration. Do they even ride properly, or are they just glued to the saddle for the tourists?" He said it quietly, the way men say things they expect the world to absorb without comment. The 2 senior aides flanking him chuckled in the soft, obedient way of men who have learned that the minister's small cruelties are the price of his patronage. I did not chuckle. I had been waiting 28 months for the morning I am about to describe, and I did not know yet that the morning had begun. We were on the reviewing stand at Horse Guards Parade, the upper terrace, the cordon tier where the host country seats its visiting delegations during the Royal Standard inspection. Below us, on the wide swept gravel, the household-mounted squadron of the House of Beaumont had taken its formation. 4 ranks, 48 riders. The morning sun was already striking the brass of their cuirasses, and the bits of their bridles in the long flat way that makes a parade look like a painting that has decided to breathe. The minister did not look at any of this. He looked at his program, then at the woman seated to his right, the wife of an industrial peer from the host country, a courtesy placement, and he said in our language again, "I have been to 4 of these in 8 years. They are the most expensive postcards in the world." I said nothing. The junior attaché says nothing. The junior attaché writes the cables and pours the coffee and stands 3 paces behind. The junior attaché also, though no one in our embassy seems to remember this, and the minister has certainly never asked, and I have certainly never volunteered, was once an Olympic team reserve rider in the dressage discipline, before a fractured pelvis from a fall at the national trials ended that line of his life and pushed him, with the practicality of a man who can no longer compete but must still eat, into the diplomatic service. I know horses. I know riders. I know, looking down from the upper terrace at the household-mounted squadron of the House of Beaumont, formed up in their cuirasses and plumed helmets on the swept gravel below, exactly what I am looking at, and exactly how rare it is. I was watching professionally for the small tells that betray a rider's bracket of skill, where his weight sat in the saddle relative to the horse's center of motion, whether the gelding's bit contact was even on both reins or favored one, whether his lower leg was quiet or talking. Most ceremonial cavalry, when you sit above them long enough on a fine morning, will give themselves away. A small leg aid the horse answers, a small unconscious half-halt, a small adjustment of seat as a leaf passes. A real rider gives nothing. The horse simply is, and the rider simply is, and the dialogue between them runs at a frequency the crowd cannot hear. I was looking at, among other things, the second man from the left in the front rank. He sat his horse the way certain men sit a chair they were born into. The black gelding under him was a Beaumont service mount, 16.3 deep chest, the kind of bone that takes a cuirassier and his kit and never complains, and the horse was so still that the only motion on his coat was the slow inflation of his ribs. The rider's reins were on the buckle in his left hand, his right hand on his thigh, his back vertical, his chin level, his eyes fixed on a point I could not see and would not have been able to see if he had pointed it out to me. He was the only rider in the front rank whose horse had not shifted weight once since we had taken our seats. I watched him for perhaps 2 minutes, and I was certain by the end of that interval that he was the senior horseman of the formation. There is a quality a top rider has in stillness that you cannot fake. I made a note of it. I did not yet have a name to attach to the note. I noticed him. I do not think the minister did. The master of the horse rode out at 9 precisely. He was a gray-haired man on a bay stallion, sash across his chest, ceremonial saber at his hip, and he raised his right hand and the parade began. The host country's anthem played, then the ceremonial trumpet call, then the standard itself was brought forward by 2 flag-bearers and lowered before the reviewing stand and raised again. The minister, beside me, sighed audibly and turned the page of his program. Then the formal pass began. What the formal pass is, for those who do not ride, it is the equestrian equivalent of a regimental drill. 48 mounted riders in 4 ranks must move as one animal. They walk forward at a precise tempo. They halt as one. They execute a half-pass, a movement in which the horse travels diagonally, forward and sideways at the same time, the legs crossing, the body straight, the head bent slightly into the direction of travel across the width of the parade ground. They depart into a collected canter on the correct lead. They perform a rein-back, a controlled reverse, the horse stepping straight backwards on diagonal pairs without losing the line of his spine into a fresh halt, and then they salute. It sounds simple when you write it out. It is not simple. A half-pass on a fresh horse with the band playing and 1,000 spectators within 40 meters is the kind of thing that takes a competition rider 6 years to perform reliably alone. 48 men performing it simultaneously, in a formation that must remain mathematically true to within the width of a horse's shoulder, is a feat I have personally never managed to execute in the second rank of a 6-horse exhibition team, and I rode at the national level. To produce it on horses who have been hauled out of stables before dawn, tacked up in 3 stones of ceremonial leather and brass, ridden to the parade ground through a city already filling with traffic, and then asked to stand for the better part of an hour in front of a crowd before performing the movement, that requires not a discipline, but a kind of devotion most professions never demand of anyone. The squadron began. They walked forward, the line held, they halted, the line held. The trumpet sounded the half-pass and 48 horses bent into the diagonal and 48 bodies leaned a fraction with them and the formation drifted across the gravel as one moving wall. I watched the second man from the left. His horse's hindquarters did not swing. His horse's shoulders did not fall. His own torso did not tilt. He was, quite simply, the center of gravity around which the rest of the front rank was navigating, whether they knew it or not. "Tomas," the minister said without looking at me, "is this nearly finished?" "The pass is the centerpiece, minister," I said. He said, and turned another page. The canter departure came next. There is a tell in a canter departure, and the tell is the horse's head. A poorly cued canter, the kind a recreational rider produces, comes with the horse's head flinging up at the instant of transition, because the rider has used too much hand and not enough leg, and the horse has braced against the bit on his way into the stride. A well-cued canter, the kind a competition rider produces, comes with the horse's head perfectly steady, the transition occurring as if the horse had thought of it himself. Across the front rank, 48 heads came up the smallest amount, and 1 head did not. The second man from the left's horse simply unfolded into the canter the way water unfolds into a glass. His rider's outside leg had moved perhaps 2 centimeters. I saw it because I was looking for it. The rein-back, the hardest. A horse asked to step straight backwards in front of a crowd will, more often than not, either refuse, drift to one side, or break his back into an arch. The squadron's rein-back was across 48 horses, good, by which I mean it was the kind of rein-back that would have placed any of them in the top quarter of a national competition. The second man from the left's rein-back was something else. His horse stepped back 6 times on perfectly diagonal pairs, each step the same length as the last, his spine a line you could have laid a ruler against, and halted with both hind feet square. The horse had not raised his head. The rider had not visibly moved his reins. I did not realize until afterwards that I had inhaled and was holding the breath. The salute came. 48 sabers drew in a single sound, that one rasping note that always carries further across a parade ground than the orchestra does, and 48 blades rose to the cheek and then descended in the formal salute to the standard, held 3 counts, sheathed. The formation stood at attention. The trumpet released them. The master of the horse turned his bay stallion and walked him forward. This was not part of the program. I knew the program. I had drafted 3 of the cables that referenced it. The master of the horse, after the salute, returns to the dais. He does not approach the formation. He does not single out a rider. He approached the formation. There is a small inhalation that goes through a parade ground at moments like this, the collective adjustment of 1,000 people who have understood, half a second ahead of being told, that the script has just shifted. I heard it. I heard it because I had been on a parade ground often enough to know what to listen for. The minister beside me did not hear it. He was still turning the page of his program as if the next item were going to clarify the previous one. He rode at a collected walk down the front rank, his bay nodding gently with each step, and he stopped his horse precisely opposite the second man from the left. He took off his right glove with the small, considered care of a man who knows he is being watched and has decided to be watched slowly. He brought his right hand to the brim of his cocked hat, and he said loud enough that every man on the dais and every man in the press tier and every official in the embassy box could hear him, "Champion Carrington of the National Cup, 2021, 2023, 2024. The compliments of the master of the horse on a textbook pass." The second man from the left brought his own right hand to the brim of his plumed helmet and answered, in a voice as level as the line of his back, "Master of the horse." That was all he said. He did not move otherwise. The master of the horse replaced his glove, turned his stallion, and walked back to the dais. The formation, as one, executed the dismissal turn, and the squadron walked off the parade ground at the cadenced 4-beat. That means the ceremony is closed. I did not look at the second man from the left as he rode out. I looked at the minister. He was holding his program open at the wrong page. His mouth was slightly parted. His coffee was, I noticed, tilted in his hand far enough that a thin runnel of it had spilled over the cup's lip and was darkening the cuff of his morning coat. He was not noticing it. The wife of the industrial peer leaned across him and said, in his language, in a voice that was deliberately and carefully sympathetic, "He is one of our most decorated equestrians, minister. The National Cup is the senior horsemanship trophy of the country. The plate is in your residence, I believe, the dining room." The minister did not answer her. He was, I think, doing what I had once watched a man do at a card table after the last hand had gone against him, running through the last hour in his head, looking for the move he should have made, finding that none of them was available now. I should explain, for those who have never had occasion to see one, about the plate. The official residence of our embassy on Carlo Square has, in the long dining room where every state dinner is held, a glass cabinet built into the eastern wall, between the portrait of our founding ambassador and the doorway through which the staff bring in the soup. Inside that cabinet is a silver charger, oval, perhaps 2 feet across, presented 40 years ago by the host country's master of the horse to our embassy, in recognition of an early bilateral cavalry exchange that the present generation has largely forgotten. The charger is engraved, around its rim, with the names of the winners of the National Cup, the country's senior horsemanship championship, updated each year by a silversmith who is brought in for the purpose. The minister has hosted, by my count, 16 state dinners in that room since his posting began. Every guest of consequence has stood in front of that charger and read those names. The cabinet is lit from above by a small dedicated lamp installed specifically so the engravings can be read. The minister himself has, on 3 occasions I can personally attest to and have in fact recorded in the social diary cables, gestured at the charger during a toast and used the phrase, "the very finest of this nation's traditions." The names on the rim include 3 times Owen Carrington, 2021, 2023, 2024. 3 engravings, each made by the same silversmith, each set in the same neat copperplate hand, each separated from the next by the name of a different runner-up the minister had also never bothered to read. The minister had walked past that name at least 16 times. He had pointed at the cabinet that held it. He had toasted, in vague, approving terms, the very tradition that had engraved it. And then, on this morning, he had looked down at a mounted formation in immaculate ceremonial dress, and called the man who held the senior horsemanship trophy of the country, 3 times running, a piece of decoration. I confess I allowed myself at this moment a very small inward smile. I did not allow it to reach my face. I had been waiting 28 months. I could afford another 30 seconds. The reviewing stand began to empty. The minister rose mechanically and gathered his program and accepted the arm of the peer's wife who steered him courteously down the wooden steps. He did not look at me. I followed 3 paces behind as I had been trained to. We crossed the gravel of the parade ground in the direction of the cars. The household mounted squadron had by this point dispersed to the stables on the far side, and the second man from the left, Champion Carrington, was no longer visible. In the car on the way back to Carlo Square, the minister did not speak. The senior aide riding in the front asked him twice whether he wished to be taken directly to the residence or to the chancery. The minister did not answer the first time, and the second time only nodded vaguely toward the residence. We arrived. The minister went up the steps and into the front hall and stopped, in the way a man stops when his body has reached a destination but his mind has not. He stood in the front hall for perhaps 10 seconds. Then he walked, without speaking to anyone, into the long dining room. I followed him as far as the doorway. He went straight to the eastern wall. He stopped in front of the glass cabinet. He looked at the silver charger. I do not know how long he stood there. He had not, in 28 months, looked at it for longer than the duration of a passing toast. He stood now and read the rim of it the way a man reads a verdict that has been handed down in his name. I left the doorway and went to my desk in the chancery wing and began to type the day's report. I made it brief, 3 paragraphs. Ceremony executed in accordance with program. Master of the horse departed protocol after the formal salute to address one rider of the front rank by championship title in recognition of a textbook formal pass. Rider so addressed, Carrington, 3-time National Cup champion, currently serving with the household mounted squadron of the House of Beaumont. I read the report through once. I did not edit it. I attached it to the day's pouch and sent it up. The next morning at the ambassador's 8 o'clock briefing, I was asked to give an account of the previous day's protocol activity. I did not embellish. I gave the schedule. I noted the Royal Standard inspection had been executed flawlessly. I noted that the master of the horse had, after the salute, ridden forward and recognized one of the formation riders, National Cup champion, 3 times by the title of his championship. I noted that the rider had been the second man from the left in the front rank. I noted that the minister had attended. The ambassador, who is a careful man and a reader of cables, looked at me for slightly longer than necessary, and then said, "And the minister's response?" "The minister was attentive throughout the ceremony, ambassador," I said, and afterwards spent a considerable interval examining the National Cup charger in the residence dining room. The ambassador made a small mark on his pad. He did not ask further. He did not need to. He had been an attaché himself once, and he knew what a junior attaché's word for attentive throughout meant when the junior attaché had once been a national-level rider himself, and the minister was the kind of man who calls the train the merely decorative. The minister did not host a state dinner that quarter. He did not, to my knowledge, again stand in front of the silver charger on Carlo Square and toast the very finest of this nation's traditions. He was reassigned, 6 months later, to a quieter post in a country with no cavalry tradition at all. I do not know whether the morning at Horse Guards Parade contributed to that reassignment. I do not require it to have. What I do know is this. On a parade ground built for a discipline most of the world does not understand, a man whose name was on a silver plate in his accuser's own dining room sat his horse for 90 minutes, performed the cleanest formal pass I have ever seen ridden by a serving cavalryman, accepted a salute, gave a salute, said 2 words, "Master of the horse," and rode back to the stables without ever knowing or needing to know what had just happened to the man on the upper terrace who had called him decoration. That is the thing about the disciplined, they do the work. The world sorts itself out around them, and the junior attaché 3 paces behind sees what the minister did not and writes it down and waits. I have been to Horse Guards Parade twice more in the years since, in the suite of a new and quieter minister who understands horses and does not speak in his own tongue about what he does not understand. I have looked each time at the second man from the left in the front rank of the household mounted squadron of the House of Beaumont. Champion Carrington is still there. He still sits his horse the way certain men sit a chair they were born into. He still does not move. I think of him sometimes when I am pouring coffee for a man who is about to say something he should not. I think of the silver plate on the eastern wall of the residence on Carlo Square. I think of the master of the horse taking off his right glove. I think of the 2 words. The junior attaché says nothing. The junior attaché writes the cables. The junior attaché waits. That morning I did not have to wait long at all.